Hey, what's up, everybody? We are back again, and today we absolutely have to talk about Lil Nas X because in the past couple of days he's been popping up in the headlines nonstop, and probably not for the reasons that you would usually expect. However, when it comes to Lil Nas X, it's kinda hard to know what to expect, as after all, the man has basically built his entire career off of non-stop publicity stunts. And because of that, his entire persona has grown very stale in the public eye. As after all, when you're a regular artist who makes good music, has a solid fan base, and doesn't really get into too much drama, when you actually do find yourself in a crazy situation, people are going to pay attention. It's kind of like living in a small town that never really gets bad weather and then you randomly get an earthquake. I mean, people are going to remember that. But if you live in a town that constantly has earthquakes, eventually you're going to get used to it. And Lil Nas X is kind of like the town that's always getting earthquakes. I mean, the first time that you see him in a scandal, it's kind of crazy, but after the seventh one, you no longer really care anymore. I mean, we've seen him go from a cowboy to a robot to Santa Claus into a demon, a snake, and then, well, back to being a cowboy. Although probably not the type of cowboy that you would want to show to your kids. And if you somehow don't know what I'm talking about or haven't really been caught up with the recent news regarding him, well, let me explain. Because only a couple of days ago, a video ended up surfacing online showing Lil Nas X walking down the middle of the road at like 3 a.m. in the morning wearing cowboy boots and not much else, with him talking about how he needed to get back to a party and that people should leave him alone. Now, what type of party he's talking about, I have absolutely no idea. All I do know is that it looks like he ran away from Jeffrey Dahmer and now he's trying to run into the loving arms of Diddy. And I mean, why not? Dr. Love has been off the streets for like 3 years at this point. It's about time that somebody finally picks up the torch. But jokes aside, it definitely seems like Lil Nas X is in a very dark place. And of course, when you're spiraling and in your worst moment, people are going to film you. And before long, that video would appear on the internet. With absolutely everybody giving their opinion on the situation, with some people feeling bad for him, basically saying that he was swept up by the music industry, taken to the absolute heights of fame before then being shelved by his label and left to basically fall into irrelevancy. And in a way, I can definitely see where people are coming from, but at the same time, this really isn't all that uncommon for a one-hit wonder. They basically blow up with one big track, they end up hitting the Billboard Hot 100 before then being unable to follow it up, usually have a pretty unsuccessful album, and then after that, the label gives up on them. And it's not a modern phenomenon by any means. I mean, this has basically been going on for the past 50 years. I mean, even back in the 60s when the entire hippie movement was going on, labels would sign a bunch of random bands that never really seemed like they had a shot at the big time, manufacture a big hit for them, and then after that track came out, they basically faded away. And in the long run, what's the big deal? I mean, you go from being some random person that nobody really cares about to an overnight celebrity, make a bunch of money, set your family up for life, and then after that you can do concerts forever playing that one hit song that everybody loves and basically cash out on your 15 minutes of fame. However, the big difference with Lil Nas X is that he didn't have a big song, he had the big song. Because by many metrics, Old Town Road is actually the biggest song ever made. And I know that's kind of a crazy claim to make about a random meme song that people have mostly forgotten about in the recent decade, but if you were around in 2019, you know that this track was absolutely everywhere. I mean, they were playing it on the radio like 10 times a day, on the country station, on the rock station, on the hip hop station, on the just basic music station. It was showing up in commercials. If you went to the grocery store, you would hear it like 5 times before you ended up leaving the store. And I'm only talking about buying milk, not even a full order. If you got a full order, you probably hear it like 15 times. And because of that, it didn't matter if you were 10 years old or 110 years old. Absolutely everybody was forced to listen to this track at least once. Although, to be fair, that's really not all that unique either. There's plenty of songs that are played non-stop that absolutely everybody is forced to listen to, whether they want to or not. The difference with Old Town Road is that it was also an absolute monster on the Billboard Hot 100, with it sitting at the top of the charts for a staggering 19 weeks, with it beating the previous record holder by a pretty wide margin. And even to this day in 2025, that record has still never been broken. It was actually matched by Shabuzi and his Bar song, with it also sitting at #1 for 19 weeks, but it didn't break the record. And even if it did, you still gotta think how crazy it was for Lil Nas to be able to get a track that big in 2019. Because all of this happened before the pandemic completely flipped the music industry on its head. I mean, nowadays it's really not that out of the ordinary for a track to sit on the Billboard for weeks and weeks and weeks, but back then, things were a lot different. TikTok hadn't yet blown up and become a worldwide phenomenon, the pandemic hadn't broken out yet, meaning that unlike a lot of other one-hit wonders, he didn't take advantage of the COVID spike when all the big-time artists were on break. Instead, he basically did it without any sort of advantage or cheat code. But with that said, how exactly did he do it? Well, it wasn't exactly master marketing or some type of high level advantage. Basically, it was a fluke. Because at the time in early 2019, Lil Nas X was an absolute nobody. I mean, we're not talking about an underground rapper who had a pretty solid fan base and a lot of push behind him, but just hadn't managed to make it into the mainstream yet, or even a local rapper who, while not really being popular in a broader sense, had a lot of support in his own city. Lil Nas had absolutely nothing. He wasn't even able to crack over 100 streams on SoundCloud. There was no prior hit, there was no project that was doing numbers online. He just happened to be some random kid with a Nicki Minaj fan page. But despite that, when he ended up putting out Old Town Road online, it would randomly start to do numbers. And nobody really knows why. I mean, overall, there's really nothing all that special about the track. I mean, it was a little bit unique for being a blend of both hip hop and country music. However, it's not like that was the first time that we ever saw that. There's been many rappers like Yellow Wolf and Kid Rock who have kind of blended the genres in the past. Not to mention, even in an underground sense, we already had Like a Farmer by Lil Tracy and Lil Uzi Vert, which was also kind of a weird blend between country music and hip hop, although it definitely was a lot more jokey than Old Town Road, with the two of them putting on this fake accent, trying to make it sound funny as opposed to making it sound catchy.
Got a big old truck, so we all gon' ride. I'm sipping lean like a Coors Light.
Basically being the type of song that you listen to once, kind of laugh at, maybe show to a couple friends, and then completely forget about. You're not really gonna put this type of track in your playlist. However, despite what I think about the track, it seems like Lil Nas X was heavily inspired by it, with him going on to create his own track in a similar style, of course, being called Old Town Road. With him even going on to ask Lil Tracy if he wanted to be a feature on the track. Although, once again, at the time, Lil Nas X was an absolute nobody, so of course, Lil Tracy never ended up seeing the DM. Which is very unfortunate, because if he had ended up doing it, he might have ended up getting a #1 hit on the Billboard, and that would have been absolutely crazy. Could you imagine a world where Lil Tracy is one of the biggest artists in the world? But we don't live in that timeline, so instead, Lil Nas X ended up putting it out as a solo track, with the initial quote-unquote music video for the track basically being some random gameplay for Red Dead Redemption 2, and with all of that in play, you would think the track wouldn't do well, but somehow people managed to find it, and before long, it would start doing numbers. And once it started doing numbers, it never really stopped, with it eventually getting so big that it would even appear on the country Billboard, which definitely caused quite a bit of controversy. As after all the good old boys who live in Nashville absolutely did not want to hear this track being played on their radio station, and because of that, many different stations would actually refuse to play it, which of course only caused even more controversy, because many people would go on to say the only reason that they didn't want it on the country radio station is because, well, Lil Nas X is a black man. Country music has been historically stuck in the past for years and years and years, unwilling to move on or try anything new, with tensions building for years, with many people making the claims that country music was just not accepting of gay people or black people or basically anybody who wasn't a white guy with a guitar. So of course, when this random black kid that nobody's ever heard of before ends up making a hit country song that really doesn't sound like a country song, they're not going to be very open to that. However, the harder that they tried to bury the track, the more attention that it would end up gaining, with many people in the hip-hop community getting behind Lil Nas X and pushing country to finally accept a new sound. However, for a while, they were at kind of a stalemate. Country didn't want to let the song be on their radio station, and hip hop was calling country racist for not allowing it to be on there. But all of that would change when Billy Ray Cyrus ended up getting involved. Now, of course, nowadays, Billy Ray is mostly known for being the father of Hannah Montana, Miley Cyrus, Noah Cyrus to a lesser extent, but back in the day, he actually was a pretty big country artist. However, calling him country royalty is a little bit of a stretch. He was basically a one-hit wonder himself. However, it doesn't really matter what type of accolades he had during his career. All that mattered is that he was known and he was a white man with a guitar, and that's what the song needed to finally be accepted by country. And once that Billy Ray remix came out with a professional music video, the track absolutely exploded, hitting #1 on the Billboard and staying there for 19 weeks, with Lil Nas putting out remix after remix after remix, doing everything that he could to keep the track trending and trying his best to beat that record. And well, he eventually ended up doing it. And that had to be an absolutely amazing feeling for him. I mean, imagine making a track in your bedroom that was mostly meant to be a joke, trying to pitch it to your all-time hero, and then getting rejected by him, only to prove absolutely everybody wrong and get yourself a Billboard Hot 100. And not only that, but the biggest Billboard Hot 100 of all time. Had to be cool, right? But where do you go from there? I mean, you already have the biggest song in the entire world. How can you possibly follow that up? Well, he kind of ended up recreating the same formula. I mean, Old Town Road took place in the past, so his new track would take place in the future. He had Billy Ray Cyrus appear on the remix, and despite being a country music one-hit wonder, he was more known for being on a Disney Channel show, so he ended up getting another actor from a different Disney show. And Sky Jackson probably wasn't the best option you could have gone with, but either way, it got people's attention once again, and his follow-up track, Panini, ended up doing pretty well. I mean, it never ended up landing the #1 spot on Billboard and definitely was nowhere near as big as the absolute monster Old Town Road, but despite that, I don't think anybody really expected it to be, and landing at #5 on the Billboard is pretty impressive. However, that's kind of the thing about one-hit wonders. They almost always get a follow-up hit solely based off of the hype from the first track, and considering how big Old Town Road was, it was pretty well confirmed that whatever he put out afterwards was also going to be a pretty big hit. However, surprisingly, his hype wouldn't die there, because almost immediately after that, he would put out a third hit called Rodeo featuring Cardi B, which once again returned to that more country style and ended up hitting #22 on the Billboard. After that, he would go on to put out a mixtape called 7, which of course was named that because it had 7 tracks on it, including Old Town Road, and of course, that EP would go on to sell really well, getting 77K first week. By the end of the year, he ended up putting out a Christmas song called Holiday, which ended up hitting the Billboard as well, ending off a pretty solid 2019. Although, here's the thing, I think everybody kind of expected him to stick around throughout the rest of the year. I mean, after all, you had a track that ended up getting that big, and I'm sure some record company ended up paying an absolutely massive bag for him and his discography, so it kind of makes sense that they're going to pump everything they have into him to make sure that he sticks around for the long run. However, during the time that all of this was going on, there was one other factor in play. Yeah, that's right, I neglected to mention it, but I'm gonna rip the band-aid off here. I'm sorry to tell you guys, but Lil Nas X is actually gay. Yeah, I know. Shocking, right? Ugh. And I hear what you're saying. Who cares? I mean, he's gay. Plenty of artists are gay. It doesn't really matter, right? Well, usually it doesn't, but considering the fact that his one big hit was a crossover between country, one of the most homophobic genres ever, and hip-hop, the absolute most homophobic genre ever, it kind of put him in a bad spot, because all of the people who were previously supporting him for being black weren't really rocking with the fact that he was gay. And on top of that, a lot of parents would come out and say that they were no longer going to allow their kids to listen to Lil Nas X, which in most cases wouldn't really matter that much. I mean, how many kids are really listening to rap? However, the thing about Lil Nas X is that his fan base was definitely a bit on the younger side. I mean, after all, putting all these different Disney stars in your music videos are definitely going to attract kids. On top of that, you got Kidz Bop coming in with the remix, which was almost as popular as the track itself, so losing that younger audience could have actually ended up hurting his career. Although, to be fair with you, I think overall it wouldn't have made that big of a difference. But that's kind of the thing about rap at fame. When you go from being an absolute nobody to one of the biggest artists in the world almost overnight, it doesn't give you that much time to get used to it. And while, yes, of course, there was many people hyping him up and a lot of positive aspects of his life, sometimes it's easy to get tunnel vision and only focus on the most negative people. Because here's the thing, the people that like you usually don't talk about it, but the people who don't like you have to make that known to absolutely everybody around them. And while usually the positive people outnumber that loud vocal minority, it's still kind of hard to avoid them. Because after all, the average person isn't that used to being criticized in every aspect of their life, and once you get a platform and any sort of fame, people are going to pick you apart for absolutely everything. And when people start to do that to you, it can kind of feel like a personal attack, and before long, you want to lash out. You want to say fuck you and try to fight back. And that's kind of what Lil Nas ended up doing in the following year, when he put out the infamous music video Montero, which of course depicted him going to hell and, well, grinding on the devil. Basically having the message, if you think I'm gonna go to hell for being gay, well fuck you, I'll go there and I'll enjoy it too. And honestly, I can't really fault him for doing this. I mean, it definitely was very provocative and all that demonic imagery definitely scared quite a few people, but at the same time, there was an actual reason to do it. Because so many of these supposed Lil Nas X fans who had hyped him up for months were now basically telling him that they only liked him as long as he played their game. And with this one music video, he showed everybody, this is who I am, I'm gonna be myself no matter what, and no matter how much you try to fight back against it, you can't change me. And honestly, in the modern day, we need more energy like that. There's so many different YouTubers and rappers and celebrities that are so afraid to say anything that might piss their audience off for fear of losing a couple fans. And that makes all the really big popular artists feel very safe and boring. They have no edge, nothing to stand out, but Lil Nas X was showing that even somebody at the absolute top of the game with absolutely everything to lose could still give a fuck you to the general audience. And well, I fuck with that energy, I'm not gonna lie. And this publicity stunt ended up paying off in a big way because he would get yet another #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100, something I don't think anybody would have ever expected back in 2019. But despite that, he was able to prove everybody wrong, and now nobody would be able to call him a one-hit wonder anymore. Because he didn't just have a big hit or a follow-up hit, he had like 5 hits at this point, finally proving that his career might actually have some longevity. Although, unfortunately, I do feel like this is where he really lost the plot. Because while Montero felt like a big fuck you to all of the detractors of Lil Nas X, everything following Montero kind of felt like a fuck you to people who didn't really deserve it. With him doubling down on all of the satanic imagery, with him going on to sell these sneakers, which had pentagrams on the side, and even apparently had human blood inside of them, which is kind of gross, although I'm not really going to clutch my pearls over these. Do I think all this demonic imagery is corny? Definitely, but at the same time, you can't only get mad at Lil Nas X. I mean, look at half of the fucking music industry at this point. You got Doja Cat dressing up like the devil, you got the Suicide Boys constantly talking about Lucifer, Playboy Cardi, Lil Uzi Vert, Trippie Redd are all constantly fucking around with upside down crosses, pentagrams, and just general demonic imagery. And let's be honest, if you're talking about who's more influential for the younger generation between Lil Nas X and Playboy Cardi, do I even have to ask? It's definitely Playboy Cardi. I mean, look at all the kids who are now doing satanic shit because of him. So if you're gonna be mad about this, you're gonna kinda have to be consistent. You're gonna have to come out against every single artist doing all of that satanic shit. But let's be honest, you don't really hate Lil Nas X because he's satanic. You hate him because he's gay. And satanic, but mostly only the gay stuff. Although, I would really only say that for the 2020 version of Lil Nas X, because after he ended up putting out Montero and seeing how pissed off he could get people for all of the gay stuff that he was doing and all the demonic stuff that he was doing, he would double down on both of them. With him doing music video after music video after music video where he would double down on all the homoerotic imagery, and while it definitely did work the first time and even ended up working the second time with his follow-up hit in industry baby, going on to hit #1 on the Billboard as well. After that, it definitely started to get old. I mean, the first time he did it, it's kind of like, hell yeah, Lil Nas, you show them. But then after that, it's like, all right, dude, I get it. I appreciate the fact that you're gay, but you don't really gotta screw a dude right in front of, oh, okay, he's doing it again, and he's doing it again. All right, we get it, you're gay, it's cool. And it basically gets to the point where if you say, personally, I don't want to watch a music video where two dudes are screwing in a shower, people are gonna call you homophobic. But it's not really about being homophobic. It's just about seeing that imagery time and time again. I mean, let me give you an example. You can be supportive of trans people, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you want to sit beside them while they're getting the surgery. Or you can be supportive of pregnant people, but it doesn't mean that you want to watch childbirth every single day. And I know some people might be offended by me comparing two gay guys hooking up to something like a surgery. I mean, it's not an exact comparison, but everybody has different levels of comfort, and not everybody wants to watch that constantly. So basically, he was scaring away a good chunk of his audience by constantly putting that imagery in. I mean, if you had any sort of kid audience left, they're definitely gone now. Not because you're gay, but because parents don't want to show their kids actual scenes. And on top of that, he would also double down on mocking God by dressing up as Jesus and putting himself on the cross. And honestly, at this point, I think he took it way too far. Before you had a point, you actually had a message behind the music. At this point, you're trying to piss people off intentionally, and I don't really fuck with that. And I really do think him mocking Jesus was the last straw for him and the label, because pretty well overnight, he went from being everywhere, popping up in commercials, constantly being played on the radio, just overall being an A-list celebrity, to pretty well being forgotten about. About once a year, he ended up putting out a track that would do somewhat well, and you would see a couple different headlines about him every couple months. But for the most part, people didn't really care anymore, and who could blame them? He had pissed off his entire core audience, he had burnt bridges with people that he never needed to, and because of that, basically everybody wanted him to go away. And for a couple years, he really did. And all of that finally brings us back to the modern day, with that video of him walking down the street in his underwear going viral. And while I did say before that some people felt bad for him, that was pretty well the minority. Because most of the people reacting to this fell into one of two camps. Either they were happy that it happened to him, saying that he deserved it for being demonic, or they flat out didn't believe that it was an actual video. And honestly, that was the camp that I fell into when I first saw it. I mean, the entire thing seems way too perfect. Cowboy boots, really? On top of that, after the video came out, there was a couple different news stories coming out saying that he was under the influence of drugs and he was at the hospital, but nobody around him was willing to give a statement, which made the entire thing seem a whole lot more sketchy. And I was honestly prepared to sit down and tell you guys that the entire thing was fake, but recently, in fact, the day that I'm recording this, he actually ended up getting in trouble for apparently assaulting a police officer. So it seems like the crash out actually is real. It's either it's real or he's really into the bit. I mean, part of me still thinks that it's fake and he's only doing this for more publicity. But the thing about that is, if it actually isn't true, then he's gonna be in way more shit than he would be if it was. If he's caught faking fighting a police officer for clout, absolutely everybody is gonna completely disregard him. However, considering the fact that it was reported on multiple different news stations and not just TMZ or academics, it probably is true. Which goes to show that he truly is spiraling, he truly is on drugs, and he is in a dark place. But here's the thing, nobody really cares anymore because he went out of his way to piss off so many people in his fan base that he doesn't really have any supporters left, with most people online cheering on his downfall. And honestly, while you can have some compassion for him, considering the fact that he is a human being and he's going through a rough time, it's kind of hard to feel that bad for him as he did this to himself. There's nothing wrong with trying to piss people off or poking the bear from time to time, but when all you do is try to make people mad constantly and you don't actually try to feed the fans who truly appreciate what you're doing, well, you're going to be left with nothing but detractors, and eventually even those people get bored and completely forget about you. And I kind of think that's where Lil Nas is heading right now. I mean, he was mostly forgotten. Nobody was really checking out any of his new music. And while this recent situation is probably going to give him another 15 minutes of fame, in the long run, I think the entire Lil Nas X experiment is completely over. I mean, he made it a lot farther than most people would have expected, but the ending is pretty depressing. Is it deserved? Probably, but well, that's up for you to decide. Let me know what you think about this entire situation in the comments below. And before you leave, I want to talk to the core audience real quick. I've seen all of your comments asking for the documentaries back, and while I definitely still am working on a couple of them right now, I really want to know who you guys actually want to see a video on. I see a bunch of different comments of people recommending the same people over and over again, but the big issue that I'm having with documentaries right now is that a bunch of people will ask for somebody, but then when I actually put it out, it kind of underperforms, and I kind of feel like my audience is split between a couple different groups of people, and because of that, I'm never really completely sure what people want to see. So in this video, if you guys could do me a favor, please comment who you want to see a video on next, and after you leave your comment telling me who you want to see, if you look through the comments and see anybody else that you might be at least half interested in watching a video on, like that comment as well, because it will show me just how many people actually want to see that person get a documentary on them, and how many of those people are being recommended time and time again with very little interest from the overall audience. I'm just trying to get more connected to what you guys actually want to see. The summer is coming to an end, we're entering into the spooky season, and I want to do a lot of documentaries on more scary type people, I guess you could say. So if you guys want to give me some recommendations that are actually plausible and not your random homie who has like 2 songs, well, I would really appreciate that. Thank you guys so much as always for watching to the end, and with all of that said, I will see you in the next one. Knife gang, delete this gang. Lil Nas X is fucking out of here, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out. Bye.